Welcome back. I trust you enjoyed our conversation with Eric and Christine and even learned some amazing things that Verizon is doing as a digital transformation leader. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm really curious to see what our sketch guru, Matt, got out of that executive conversation. Hey, Matt, you still out there, man? Are you around?
Yes, sir.
Hey, I don't know how you come up with this, but will you show us what you have so far?
Okay, so the first thing that jumped out at me listening to this conversation was Eric's comment that since everyone started working from home, every day was like Mother's Day on the network in terms of both the voice and the data traffic. So that seemed worthy of capturing in a speech bubble. In terms of challenges, I heard him say that the challenge of working from home included students, office workers, and telehealth connections. So having a secure, high-capacity network was the biggest challenge to accommodate all of that. There was a bit of a discussion about data science. Eric used the phrase "data is king" or "data is queen," and mentioned all of the different technologies that come together that are really hard to get some good visibility on. But when you get that visibility, you can make smarter decisions and ultimately result in improved customer experience. In terms of the focus moving forward, he said that having robust video conferencing was front of mind for customers, as well as the increased capacity. And it was clear that from all of this, the pandemic actually has helped the digital transformation in many organizations. And then lastly, Christine asked Eric a bit about the digital transformation program at Verizon. And it was interesting to hear him talk about things like having simpler language and having less forms for customers to fill out and making it easier to transact and interact with the company, which, that's not technology related, but it still makes a huge difference to the user experience. So I thought that was really fascinating, actually. And I just kind of finished off by threading through this phrase that Eric mentioned about how Verizon's vision is to connect people, places, and things across the globe, anywhere on any device, which feels pretty aligned to the goals that MEF aims for. So it's not surprising that Verizon have a big role to play in partnering with MEF.
Matt, that looks incredible. You're on top of everything. Share with me, how do you come up with the ideas? What do you really listen for to get that?
Thanks, John. Well, there's kind of three things going on at the same time. I'm currently listening and synthesizing and capturing. And I guess I have a bit of a buffer in my head, and it's like a muscle that over the years, practice doing this work, you get better and better.
And obviously you've been doing this a long time. When did you get started?
I definitely drew lots of comics as a kid, but if I look back at my university notes from lectures, and funnily enough, I studied telecommunications at university, they kind of look more like works of art than revision notes, but that's probably where it started.
So we have that completely in common. I studied telecom at university, and look at us now. We've both kind of gone different paths as artists, and now, of course, telecom pulled us back, didn't it?
Amazing.
It's amazing. So look, we'll catch up with you in a little bit. We're going to keep the show going, but thank you so much for sharing your talents with us. Now it's time to push the edge with our analysts. In this segment, we have Roy Chua, founder and principal of AvidThink, together with James Crawshaw, the principal analyst at Omdia.
Roy, good to see you again.
Hey, James. Likewise, always a pleasure. I'm glad to have you with me on this one as we chat about a couple of items, I think, in terms of the MEF Infinite Edge series. I think one of the questions that was posed to us was about megatrends, wasn't it?
Many of these are not brand new. They've been around for a while. It's rare that something brand new appears completely out of nowhere. It's usually an evolution. And I guess one of the hottest ones that, but we were both on a call today with a public cloud provider talking about their partnership with a telecom operator. There have been announcements recently about other public cloud providers partnering with telcos to go to market together to sell cloud services to their enterprise customers, but also to move a lot of their own internal IT workloads into public cloud. Even mainframe applications are moved into public cloud, which you'd have thought that would be the last thing you'd want to do, but apparently that makes sense, and a number of telcos have been doing that. I guess what we're seeing is the telecom operators, they want to stay relevant in the eyes of their enterprise customers. So they've got to be seen to be partnering with these public cloud providers. It's typically the top three, doesn't normally go outside of that, at least for the North American and European operators that I tend to follow. We do see, to some extent, operators also embracing cloud services themselves.
That's right. That's right. Now, I know you've been looking at some of the moving the OSS and service assurance into the public cloud. Definitely a big trend there for sure. And I think we'll see some private networks, as been in the announcement, private networks, the operational aspect now starting to be run in the public cloud. And I think they're going to start there. And then we'll see, as you say, whether the mobile networks get there or not, right? Hard to say.
Well,
But
yeah, I mean,
yeah.
on that, you obviously had the acquisitions by Microsoft of Metaswitch and Affirm Network, so that gave them some core mobile network software capabilities. And I think the idea is that a private enterprise that wants to run its own private mobile network can do that using those software applications running in Azure.
Right. Run in the cloud.
Yeah,
Yep.
exactly. And there still
Yep.
might be a managed service that's provided by a mobile operator, but those applications don't need to be hosted in the operator's own data centers. They can be hosted in public cloud, and the operator simply wraps a managed service around there. So that's a sort of partnership agreement. And I don't see it necessarily as a competitive threat to the telcos, and nor do I see them just yet moving their own core networks into public clouds. Maybe.
No, I think that's going to take a while.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's going to be proven first, and private networks are probably a safe place to do it. And speaking of mobile networks, I think one of the other elements, the mega trends, if you will, is mobility. The consumers and enterprises are a lot more dependent on mobile networks and technologies. Certainly, I think when we saw this work from home driven by the recent pandemic, this work from anywhere trend that was already happening, and some of the work that we do, and I'm sure you as well at Omdia, when we work with carriers and enterprises, they're trying to understand what the long-term importance, right, of a mobile-first IT strategy is. So I think that's definitely one of those things. And when they look at that, one of the things that have come up recently actually is I think one of these items that you have here on your list, which is cybersecurity.
Right.
So that's, I think, one of the mega trends, right?
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
What do you think? Yeah.
Well, and it sort of segues nicely into what you were talking about there, the work from home experiment, really, that has been forced upon the world this year. And many of those workers having to connect over mobile connections if they haven't had a good enough broadband service. But this work from home has also brought a huge increase in cyber threats for enterprises. Their workers, spread around the country, no longer inside their safe, secure network. It's a new attack vector. And on top of that, we've seen a massive increase in DDoS attacks this year. That's not so much of a problem, I guess, if it's an online gambling website that's been taken down. But if it's a hospital or a school, these our dependence upon connectivity has been demonstrated this year. And so being prepared for cyber threats, whether it's DDoS, whether it's ransomware attacks, that really is an absolute priority for enterprises. And I think it's something that the service provider community can help with too, because cybersecurity is obviously a very complex field. Telcos have got that scale to be able to help enterprises work their way through.
Yep, absolutely. And speaking of, the telcos helping with cybersecurity, one of the ways that I'm seeing them be able to help is because they own the last mile, they own the edge, as it were, right? So, and that edge itself gives them the ability to put services there, such as, cyber protection, right, cybersecurity at the edge for wireless and wired networks, and that brings us to one of these other mega trends, which is distributed computing. Sometimes people call it edge, but that's, it's really distributed computing, computing in the clouds, the public clouds you're talking about, computing certainly on premises, but now coordinated through the public clouds, right? And then sort of the in-between spot that, where the telcos have some assets in terms of edge computing. And this computing sort of everywhere is changing sort of how businesses are thinking about, how do I acquire data? How do I process data? How do I transmit data, right? Where do I store it, right? And what's the best place to do that? Right? Taking into account costs, data jurisdiction, cybersecurity, right? Compliance, and all these elements. So I think that's definitely one of those things that I'm seeing. And speaking of sort of edge and processing, I'm also seeing another trend is just virtualization and digital data capture that enables it, right? Low power computing, sort of bring computing and data capture everywhere, software control of all the different process elements. So with the edge, we're seeing this industry 4.0, right? Industrial IoT, where you're digitizing historically sort of manual processes, not a lot of automation, not a lot of analytics, and that definitely, that processing of the data is definitely one of those mega trends, right? How do you digitize your workflows, your processes, your business, and how do you use computing to provide you with the insights, right? AI, machine learning for optimization, right? For learning, right? How do you do it with automated facilities given the large number of business elements or network elements or IT elements that you have to manage going forward? Speaking of success stories, and how do you define, right, success for maybe a service provider, right? How do you define a market leading digital service provider? I know you've worked on this, right? What are your thoughts?
Essentially, it's shorthand, it's business speak for modernization, for adapting to change and taking advantage of all of this wonderful modern technology that's out there, whether it's mobile apps, public cloud, or even just a half decent website, which for some service providers is still a challenge, I know. But yeah, we've got a slide that we prepared, and it's sort of some perspectives on how the telco industry has moved from this sort of traditional or legacy approach to a digital approach. And essentially, there are different aspects. So, strategy, for example, in the past, the telecom operators used to be very network technology focused. Their strategy was about rolling out DSL or rolling out 3G, 4G. To some extent, that's still true. That as an industry, we obsess about the next generation in mobile and the next number of gigs of optical bandwidth. But uh, but generally, there's more of a focus these days, I think, on customer. What the customer wants, what the customer needs, and if the customer's needs are satisfied by 100 gig or by 4G mobile. Uh, then maybe you need to think about other ways to satisfy them. Bundling other services or wrapping things around security, for example. And how do you measure this? Well, I guess certainly in a consumer market, you measure it with Net Promoter Score, and I think you can do that with enterprise customers as well. Um, Marketing. So in the past, it was very much about locking in the customer. You'd sign them up with an attractive looking deal, and then they're presumably tied in with a handset, and then they'd be locked in for 24 months, and you just hope that about it. They keep on paying massive fees, even if they're out of contract. Now, the customer is a lot smarter. Regulators have made it easier to switch. So now it's all about having a sort of frictionless customer journey. So Rakuten Mobile in Japan, for example, one of the ways they're differentiating is they have completely digitized the whole customer onboarding process. So apparently in Japan, it still can take 4 or 5 hours of filling out forms and sitting in a service provider's retail outlet to switch over. And Rakuten have looked at this. This is ridiculous. We're going to do it all electronically. it's a couple of clicks, and you're done. And so that
that's a good example.
That makes it more attractive to
it does
work with them, or at least try them out. And then if you find it's not as good as my previous service provider, you switch back.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So
it's that. And Rakuten's a good example, because I think, looking at sort of the slide there, is they embody a lot of the other elements that you talk about, whether it's services, it's people, processes, or quality. A lot of those elements came from the megatrend, right? The public clouds, right? The hyperscalers. And I think Tarek Amin was quite clear. He had learned and visited, the public cloud providers and seen what they had done. And Rakuten, when he joined them, he was allowed to create, and obviously it helped that Rakuten was an e-commerce company to begin with, right? Not a legacy telco, as it were. But his processes and his philosophy embodies those elements that you have in there, right? Things like API based, right? DevOps, agile development, MVP, right? I see that, the things that you call out, absolutely, I see them embodying it. And certainly there's still, the jury's still out whether they'd be successful in the end, right? They still have to sign up a lot of subscribers, but they're certainly doing a lot of things right. But I think there's also one message I think we didn't touch on it the first time we spoke of the mega trends. I think all this compute, all this AI, all this distributed computing and digitizing everything does have a cost. I think I think there's something that I know that you talk about, which is sustainability, right? And that's I think maybe we want to wrap up with the audience here, which is, this is all great, this is all wonderful, but we need to be mindful, I think, of one big item, a mega trend, which we've caused and will impact us whether we like it or not, right? Sustainability. So what's your thoughts, James, around sustainability?
Obviously it's front of mind for all organizations, whether they're simply paying lip service to it, or they're doing it because they're wanting to attract investors. Green finance is a big issue now. But whatever the motivations, it is a real issue. And the telco industry is not the problem. The telco industry, in many respects, is part of the solution. By enabling people to work from home, telecommuting, you reduce a lot of unnecessary gasoline burning. There is energy that's used in telecom networks, mobile networks in particular, but there's a lot of intelligence that goes into making those networks efficient, putting cells to sleep, for example, when they're not being used. I think the telecom industry is doing a lot of good things in this area. You hear from the big operators about their initiatives. It's clearly important to them, and they are already on a path to carbon neutrality. The next step is for them to force the supply chain. The supply chain is not necessarily there yet, and I'm thinking here in particular of things like smartphones. Should we really be replacing our smartphones every 2 years just because battery is dying?
Yep. No, definitely agree there. Sustainability is a big issue, and I think, as you pointed, the telcos are doing well. As we build up 5G networks to consume more power on those cell towers, I mean, it is more spectrum efficient than 4G, but we are demanding so much more bandwidth, and I think it's incumbent upon all of us, right, to
absolutely. But don't forget that
keep an eye on it.
Yeah, that bandwidth's being used for a reason. It's being used to optimize truck routes, for example, so that less energy is being consumed. So we are becoming more efficient by using technology.
Yeah, no, agreed, James. Well, always a pleasure to speak with you.
Roy?
Always learn a lot, and thank you to the MEF for the opportunity.
Yeah, thank you so much
to chat with James. Yeah.
Thank you, Roy. Thank you, MEF.